What's going on, everybody? Today, going to be previewing the 2024 Steelers defense. I'm going to go through and talk about all these position groups one by one, the starters, the depth pieces behind them. Going to be talking about some breakout players, important supporting cast members, all that good stuff, as well as some potential question marks that I have, concerns over, and then just my general expectation for how this unit kind of needs to play in the fall. So, we did the offensive preview about a month ago, I think, with Nick Martin on the channel, which was a lot of fun. But I'm flying solo here, kind of running out of time to get my thoughts out there with the regular season kind of staring us right in the face. But really wanted to get this done. I know a lot of you guys have kind of asked for this, really like the offensive preview, so I wanted to do the same here. So if you could just drop me a like, subscribe to the channel, all that good stuff is greatly appreciated on my end. Just some real quick disclaimers, okay? I'm recording this about 48 hours early from the time that you all will see this in your feeds. I'm actually on vacation taking my family to Disney World. But I wanted to get this to you all. Like I said, I feel like y'all deserve it, especially with all the support y'all have shown me. So it's a much needed reset for me. But, when I get back, it's full steam ahead, man. I'm really looking forward to the regular season. So if you're looking for additional content, exclusive film rooms, among other perks, consider becoming a member to the channel. I appreciate all of your support. This off season, just again, really pumped about the regular season, all the things that we got coming, closing in on 8,000 subscribers. It's a huge deal, man. So thank you guys very much. But I got a lot to talk about here. Not a lot of time to do it. So let's jump into this thing. Before we kind of jump into the 2024 version of the Steelers defense, just a quick recap of where this group finished last year. Wrote down some stats. This is a group that finished 7th in EPA per play, 8th in success rate, 8th in points per drive. Pretty much any statistic you look at, DVOA, anything. This was an objectively good defense last year. And that was despite, being, I think, about a middle of the pack in terms of like adjusted games lost. Obviously Cam Hayward missed a good chunk of the season. Minka Fitzpatrick, I think, missed about 7 games as well. So hopefully a little bit better luck from a health perspective. And hopefully we see that on the horizon this year. They had a lot of issues really up the spine of the defense last year, playing a lot of guys, sometimes even guys off the streets. So I think there's a lot of optimism around that. The offseason is always a funny time. You guys have heard me say this, but, all 32 teams, their fan bases, even the people who, like myself, who, cover the teams, seem to think that their team got absolutely better on paper, even though we know that that's quite literally impossible. Not all 32 teams will be better than they were the year prior, but as it pertains to the Steelers defense, I actually think that's the truth, man. I just think if you look at their base defense, they returned 8 of their 11 starters. They basically swapped out Cole Holcomb for Patrick Queen, Patrick Peterson for Dante Jackson, Keanu Neal for Deshaun Elliott. I think that you can make an argument that they upgraded at all 3 of those positions. And they returned like pretty much all their coaching staff. Obviously, Tara Austin's coming back, defensive coordinator, Mike Tomlin, huge hand in the defense. There's really a lot to be pretty confident about. There's a lot of sure things, as I would put it, on this defense. Now, I kind of want to talk about all those guys and how they kind of changed the complexion of this defense. But if you remember, like my biggest focus for the offseason was they've just got to get faster at the second, third level. I really thought that was the one glaring issue last year, partially because of the injuries that they suffered, but I also thought that just their regular personnel just was not fast enough. There were just a lot of times in particular against certain matchups, against some of the more loaded offenses where they just felt slow. I mean, there's not really another way for me to put that. It was also cool to hear Steelers assistant general manager Andy Weidel talk about, them getting faster and adding more speed on defense was a priority for them as well. So it was kind of cool that they saw it the same way for sure. I think that was a big part in them kind of targeting Dante Jackson, a guy that they've known for quite a while. Scouted him coming out of LSU, trade for Deontay Johnson. But I just think if you look at the guys that they acquired really throughout the offseason, whether it was free agency trades through the NFL draft, there's definitely a priority on speed. And it wasn't just, lip service. They actually took that priority and, put it on their roster. So I'm excited about that aspect of it because I thought that was, like I said, that was my biggest focus. And they really checked that box. So let's kind of start with the trenches. Just talk about this front. Cam Hayward, at the time of this recording, he hasn't inked a contract extension. I mean, that could honestly come any day. But Cam, even though he's getting up there in age, still a very valuable player in my eyes, especially as a run defender. You just look at some of the numbers last year. They averaged 3.8 yards per carry on defense with Hayward on the field. When he was off the field, whether that being on the sidelines or just when he was injured, they allowed over 4.5 yards per carry. I don't know what the contract negotiations are like. I'm not really sure what the money he's looking for. I know that that's a difficult negotiation process because he's been a linchpin for this defense for so long, one of the better Steeler defenders of his era. But also, like, he's paid quite a bit of money right now, making over 20 million APY. It's usually reserved for like top pass rushers. His pass rush numbers really declined last year. How much of that was him coming back from like the sports hernia injury and all that stuff? Like, does he still have enough burst? I think the strength and the pure, just like grown man strength in the trenches is always going to be valuable. And that really shows up as a run defender. And now, how much of a bounce back does he see as a pass rusher? That's kind of to be determined, right? I would be really surprised if it got back to where it was in 2022. But I do think a slight uptick could definitely be in the cards. It's just about finding where that number kind of makes sense for both sides. So hopefully it ends the way it should end. Hopefully everybody's happy with it. But as of right now, like it is a little bit of a question mark heading into the season next year. But Larry Ogunjobi, despite some and really encouraging flashes in that preseason game versus Detroit, which I was really happy about, saw him in the backfield multiple times. I think Larry O honestly just is what he is at this point, which is an inconsistent player. Still, I think that if you can get a little bit more disruption from him, that would obviously be very helpful. Health is a huge question mark for him. This has been through a lot of injuries, not necessarily that hasn't necessarily always meant that he's going to miss a lot of games, but he's always seems to be a guy that's playing at less than 100%. So Ogunjobi, a guy that, I think you've seen some flashes of a quick first step from him, which is kind of a big part of his game. So hopefully that manifests itself into success in the regular season. Um, just not really overly optimistic that he's going to be a guy that's necessarily going to play up to what his cap hit says. But a perfectly fine player to be in your rotation. A guy that I am potentially irrationally high on is Keanu Benton. I've talked about him a lot this offseason, but I just love what I saw from Benton last year, man. He dropped weight. Over the course of the offseason, I think he's about 12 pounds lighter. I think he looks leaner on the field, and he's actually looks to me a tick more explosive. Not that those things were really even necessary to me or question marks that I had coming into the season. My sort of bold prediction is that I think he finishes with like 7 sacks as a sophomore. And I don't know how hot of a take that is or not, but I just looked through some of the numbers, man. Like he only had 53 pass rush chances last year on third down. That was well less than half of what Ogunjobi's numbers were last year, even less than a guy like Montravius Adams. It was only a couple more than a guy like Armon Watts had last year. That simply can't happen again. I feel like if the Steelers don't play him more on third downs in those obvious pass rush situations, it's coaching malpractice in my eyes. I think his ability to rush from multiple different alignments. I mean, he could play some three tech for you. He could play in a 2-eye. But honestly, like his ability to kind of go one-on-one with the center and win those pass rush matchups is really encouraging. And as long as that slightly reduced weight doesn't mean that, he struggles to take on doubles, which I don't think is necessarily even a concern. I'm pretty optimistic about what he's going to do. I think that Keanu Benton's a guy that probably will start to get like more national media love here in the next 12 months. And I'm really excited to see it. So he's a guy who I feel even better about now than I did when they drafted him a couple years ago. So, I actually feel pretty encouraged by what I've seen from the depth pieces in the preseason. I'm not sure. Actually, I'm pretty confident that they don't have anyone as like a potential Hayward replacement or anything like that. And, who knows what's going to happen with Ogunjobi's contract, right? Like technically he has another year after this. They could probably move on with pretty limited impact from a financial standpoint. We'll see what that looks like. I think defensive line is going to be a talking point come next draft cycle. But as far as like rotational depth, I think that the guys like Montravius Adams, even some flashes from a guy like DeMarvin Leal, Dean Lowry, who's still working his way back into form. I think that's a perfectly fine rotation, especially considering how bullish I am about just this front seven in general from a starter standpoint. Kind of moving to the edge rusher position, honestly, it's an embarrassment of riches, man. Like, very few teams can boast an edge rusher duo as strong as like Watt and Highsmith. Absolutely one of the best duos in the game. A pretty lethal 1-2 punch when both those guys are out there and healthy. Just in terms of TJ, man, like finished 7th in the NFL in total pressures last year. I think he led the league in sacks again. I mean, you guys don't need me to break his game down in depth. He's one of the best players in the NFL, full stop. I think with Highsmith, a lot of people have mentioned to me, the sack totals, they got sliced in half last year, but the pressure rate actually increased. And to me, I think he's just due for a little bit of positive regression in that regard. I think that the expectation should be that he's going to have another like 10 sack season, even if it's not 14 and a half, like it was maybe in 2022. I think for Highsmith is like, I think he has, in talking with him in Latrobe and having a brief conversation with him, I think he understands that offensive tackles were beginning to play him a little bit differently last year, kind of sitting on the inside spin counter. So I'm interested to see like what his counter to that counter is, and how he continues to grow as a pass rusher. But again, this is one of the better like number two rushers in the NFL, and I also think his coverage ability is sort of underrated too. It allows, I think, you as a defensive coordinator to do some creative stuff in the simulated pressure game with a guy who's comfortable operating in space, and we saw a couple flashes of that last year. So not something you want him doing a ton, but something he's capable of doing from time to time for sure. I'm extremely excited about Nick Herbig, man. He played less than I think 200 snaps last year, even coming off of just lighting the preseason on fire. We just did a film room on him last week on the channel, but I think he looks a little bit stronger. I think he's figuring things out from a mental perspective. He's not all the way there yet from a pass rush plan standpoint, but I do see some improvement. I've wrote and talked about like how confident I am in his ability to be the top backup at the edge position, with Marcus Golden kind of coming back and then stepping away again in his retirement. I think he just needs more snaps, in my opinion. I think he only played about 17% of the defensive snaps last year. That number needs to go way, way up, and I think that it's reasonable to expect that it will, heading into his second season. I also think that that could be a way to preserve a guy like TJ Watt later in the season as he kind of approaches. It's crazy to think about this, but TJ is actually turning 30 in October, so I wouldn't be opposed to letting TJ take a couple extra plays off this season, especially in some of these games earlier in the year to kind of keep him fresh for the home stretch when they begin to play all these teams in the AFC North and the schedule gets pretty brutal and all that stuff. So I think this off-ball linebacker room looks really strong on paper, has some really interesting pieces that I think complement each other really well. I think Queen and Roberts are really good compliments to one another from a skill set perspective. Just in terms of PQ, man, I mean, we've had him on the channel, we've done a film room on him, but I'm really excited to see what he looks like with more responsibility on his plate and coverage. I definitely think that he has the chops. I think he's shown the improvement in that regard to do even more than Baltimore asked him to do. I'm just excited to see if that's actually the truth or not. I think, the one thing that really has stood out to me in watching Queen just during the summer, at practice when I was able to make it up there to Latrobe for training camp, and then just in the preseason limited exposures as well as just his range, just jaw dropping. Like the dude can cover so much ground in the blink of an eye. That was one of the things I loved about his film, but it's just seeing that in person. I think it's going to make a big impact on this defense, especially as it pertains to what we saw last year with some of the limitations that we saw at the second level from a speed perspective. That's just not going to be the case this year, man. Like he's going to clean up a lot of different stuff. And I think if you can keep him clean and let him do what he does best, there's a chance for him to be like a potential, a Pro Bowl caliber player is absolutely within his wheelhouse, and potentially maybe even more. We'll see. So, but his complement kind of partner in crime. I think every team needs a player like a Landon Roberts. Like full stop, just one of my favorite players to watch on this team, offense or defense. I just love watching the dude play. Downhill thumper type, thrives off his physicality. I think his take on ability is really nice. A lot of linebackers these days like are not very good at taking on blocks at the second level, especially when those offensive linemen climb and are able to get their hands on them. He like is so good in that regard, man. And I think that he was actually very solid in coverage last year too, he was a lot better in that regard than I anticipated. I did not see that coming, but the fact that he wasn't a total liability, especially given his reputation coming in, was pretty cool. I think that Queen and Roberts too, like being the vocal leaders of this defense, is going to be a cool thing to see. It's something that I think you guys will even be able to tell off the television too. Like those guys, very, very good communicators, strong leaders. I think this defense is going to have an attitude about them, and I think that it's going to be a reflection of those two guys in particular. It's just kind of my take. So, I think bringing in a guy like Peyton Wilson kind of reinforces that idea that, they're looking to get faster in the back end. I think he's going to play quite a bit. They're probably going to rotate him into some nickel, potentially even some dime, depending on, matchups, things like that. I have some questions about what it's going to look like in coverage, at least starting out, but I think the traits are there for him to be a really good player for sure. We saw some flashes in the preseason opener from him in terms of like gap shooting, getting downhill, being around the football, all things we saw at NC State. I know a lot of you guys are really excited about him. I'm excited to see how quickly they can kind of get him up to speed and continue to round out his game. But, full stop, man. I think this front seven in general has a chance to be very, very special. I truly believe that. I just think that the pieces they just fit together extremely well. And I'm really optimistic about what it's going to look like up front on this defense. So I think in the back end, Porter, Dante Jackson going to be the starters out wide. I think Porter's rookie season, honestly, a little underrated in my opinion. The length, the ability to dictate the terms to the offense on the boundary, super nice. What they asked him to do from day one in terms of following opposing number one wide receivers around. I mean, it's just not something you see a lot of rookie cornerbacks even given the responsibility to do, but also like how he carried out those assignments was really impressive to me. I know there's some things to clean up in terms of like you ideally would like to see him reduce the penalties. I think those are probably always going to be there due to his play style. But I think he got a little bit better as a tackler as the year went on. And for a guy headed into his sophomore season, like Arrow is absolutely straight up. He forced an incompletion, I think, on 19% of his targets last year. That's in the upper echelon of his position. When you get into the high teens or even into the 20s, those are typically like the number one corner types that are, eliminating that separation from the target. So I'm optimistic about Porter. I think he's a really good player and he's only continuing to get better. In terms of Dante Jackson, I think the idea with that acquisition is that his speed gives them something that they've kind of been missing from that CB2 spot for quite a while. He's a guy who I think is best in off ball coverage. I think he's better at man than he is in zone. He can play from a pedal. I think despite the injuries, I think you still see his ability to run from a straight line perspective. I think that if he could just limit the big plays over the top, not let his eyes get him into trouble, I think he's a noticeable upgrade there. And at worst, he's a fine stopgap solution that's on just like a 1 year deal without any long term risk associated with that. So, I think that so far, based on what I've seen, it's been perfectly fine out there. We'll see what it looks like in the regular season. But I do think that he's a intriguing compliment um, across from Porter and can at least give them like baseline CB2 play, which is perfectly fine. So the depth, very, very improving behind those guys. I think Corey Trice seems to be a guy that they like just based on how they talk about him, how they're deploying him. He's getting some dime backer reps as well. I like him too. You guys know I like Trice, but we just got to see him stay on the field. I think that's a big question mark. I think this is an area of the roster that they should be looking to add talent before week one, whether that's in the slot or another body outside, or potentially even both. I know that the wide receiver discussion has dominated a lot of the headlines, a lot of the talking points throughout the offseason. Cornerback could be another area that I think that they probably need to look at least investing a little bit more in. And kind of speaking of the slot, Beanie Bishop missed some time, missed last preseason game. But Bishop's an energetic player, I think, who's around the ball a lot in the summer. Also seems like he had a pretty good handle for the special teams part of the job. Him being around the ball matches what I saw on his college tape last season. I think that he does add some more quickness, some more long speed than what they had in the slot last year, especially, between Chandon Sullivan, between Patrick Peterson. I think that's probably the main reason that those guys haven't been brought back, at least to this point. Not saying they can't be. But I think between him, Deshaun Elliott, and those like big nickel sets, that's where the majority of the slot snaps are probably planned to go as of right now. We'll see. Pending, other acquisitions, maybe before this video, probably not, but before week one, I think you're probably going to see some sort of acquisition in the secondary, or maybe that's just hopium on my part. But, I think Elliott going to be your starting strong safety. He has just enough versatility for what you need. I think they want to get Minka playing a little bit back more to his natural free safety spot, have him patrolling the center field. I feel like if that happens, probably another 4 to 5 interception season on the way. Of course, health permitting, missed some time last year with an injury, but Minka's still one of the best in the game in terms of playing the back end, taking the ball away. But just to kind of wrap things up here, just some questions that I have about this group in general that I was kind of asking myself that I wanted to hit on for the preview. What changes should they be leaning into defensively from a schematic standpoint? I think Terrell Austin wants to play a little bit more man coverage than he played last year. I think they finished about 13th in man usage. But I think, with the personnel that he's got, I think that they should see a little bit of an uptick in that regard this year, maybe a little bit more man. The thing I'm most intrigued by, though, is how they're going to deploy all these pass rushers. Preseason is always really vanilla in terms of, sim pressure, studs, blitzes, all those things. But this group not only has a ton of guys that can win one-on-one, but they also have effective blitzers at the second level. Queen, Wilson, Roberts, all those guys can blitz. They're really good on stunts as the crashers. They have an effective loopers. We've seen that from like Nick Herbig. I think they could do some creative like three edge sets. Really, as long as they're able to stop, the run on first down, continue to be efficient on the early down phase. I think that third and long, man, it should be the floodgates should open. Their possibilities are endless. What you could do with this crew, it's nice because a lot of times these defenses kind of have one or the other. Like either you have sometimes teams will have to, kind of lean into more exotic blitzes or stunts or anything like that because they don't have the one-on-one guys to necessarily like win on their own. But the Steelers have both, I think. So it's a really talented front seven. I want to see them continue to create chaos. I think last year they finished 12th in pressure rate and ninth in sack percentage. I think they're better than that on paper. I would be sort of surprised that they weren't a little bit finishing a little bit higher than that this year. But I think that some creativity up front could definitely go a long way. Biggest concerns. I mean, I think everyone worries about depth in certain places, but I think that that's just a league wide thing. Everybody would like to feel better about their depth pieces. I talked about that at cornerback a little bit, but I'm a little concerned that we're just kind of hand waving this slot corner job thing. Not and without any disrespect to Beanie Bishop, because I think he looked good at least in the practices that I saw. It seems like he's had a good summer, but it does certainly feel a little bit weird, or the fact that this lack of investment at that spot, especially considering like they're going to be in sub package personnel 65% of the time or so. It does feel a little bit weird that they haven't invested a little bit more competition in that regard. I could definitely see this being something that, a month into the season, we all kind of look back and say, like, this plan was not a good plan. But we'll see. I mean, you just don't really see like undrafted free agents starting. I mean, I consider like the slot corner a starter in NFL defenses. I just don't think that you typically see undrafted free agents kind of without any realistic competition just be, I don't want to say given as if he didn't earn it, but like, playing in that type of role year one. I think it's a little bit weird, but we'll see how that plays out. Hopefully it's good. But just in terms of expectations, man, this is the most expensive defense in the league by a healthy margin. I think they've spent like $23 million more than the next highest spending team, I think, which is the Packers, I believe. A veteran group returns pretty much everybody. I mean, another top 8 finish in the categories we spoke about in the beginning is the absolute bare minimum expectation, in my opinion. Top 5 should be the goal. Just full stop. Another thing that I would like to see is just the continued development of guys like Benton, Porter, and can the growth of like some of these younger pieces kind of offset maybe some of the age defects from a guy like Cam Hayward, who's kind of getting into the latter portion of his career. Also, we mentioned, TJ Watt's not getting any younger, things like that. I would love to be sitting in this position heading into next year, feeling very, very confident that either Benton or Porter, or hopefully both, are viewed like widespread as a red chip player, a potential blue chip player on this defense, and kind of take the spot of like one of the foundational pillars of this group moving forward. So those are kind of my expectations and things that I'm really hoping to see this season. So I know that's a lot of words, a lot of numbers to tell you guys that I'm pretty bullish on this side of the ball. I'm expecting a really strong season from this unit. Hopefully the offense can provide just enough support to make things competitive, hopefully able to sneak into the playoffs, all those things. Hopefully, there's not as much stress kind of thrown on that side of the ball, keep them a little bit fresher later into the season. But I'm curious to hear from you guys. Who do you guys like? Who are you all looking forward to seeing the most? Like, who are some breakout players that you're keeping an eye on? What are your biggest concerns as we head into 2024? All those things. Let me know those things in the comments. As always, shout out to our channel sponsor, Homage. Be sure to cop some Steelers gear for the regular season using the link in the description. Planning on hopefully doing a giveaway whenever I get back from Florida. Try to get you guys some merch. So I'm excited about all those things. I will see you guys in about a week. And then it's week 1, something I'm really excited about. As always, I appreciate your support. Take care of yourselves. Enjoy your week. Peace and love.